Last summer, when the sun baked my little plot like a clay oven in the usual garden favorites, those tender tomatoes and delicate beans wilted into sad brown skeletons by mid-July, I found myself standing barefoot in the dirt, wondering how anyone could coax real food from the ground anymore. The air shimmered with heat, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your hopes for a bountiful harvest fade fast. But then I reached down and brushed aside a few dusty leaves on a low, unassuming row I'd planted on a whim from seeds passed along by an old gardening friend. There they were, plump pods hanging tough and true, bursting with life while everything else begged for mercy. That moment reminded me how the soil has its own quiet wisdom if we're willing to listen. Over the years, I've learned that the hottest days don't have to mean empty baskets and grocery store dependence. There are remarkable plants, passed down through countless generations in the world's most unforgiving corners, that don't just survive blistering heat and scant rain, they truly come alive in it. These aren't flashy hybrids from seed catalogs. They're the steadfast survivors that fed families long before modern farming rewrote the rules. In my small garden here in a zone where summers now push past 100 degrees more often than they used to, I've watched them turn challenges into abundance. And the best part? They ask so little in return, giving back to the soil as they grow. Let me share what I've discovered, one handful of earth at a time, so you can invite these heat-loving allies into your own backyard. Whether you're tending a sunny patch in the American Southwest, a Mediterranean-style border in southern Spain, or even a sheltered spot in a cooler corner of northern Europe with a bit of extra care. It all starts with understanding the soil's hidden reserves. Most of us have been taught to pamper plants with rich compost and constant watering, but in extreme heat, that approach can backfire, pushing lush leaves at the expense of deep roots and sturdy yields. Instead, I focus on building resilience right from the start, loose, well-draining beds that encourage plants to reach downward for moisture. And across every one of these crops, I've seen the same pattern. They thrive on lean living, rewarding patience with steady harvests when the thermometer climbs. Take those humble desert beans I mentioned earlier, the ones that first caught my eye in the heat. Tepary beans have been a revelation for me. Picture a plant that stays close to the ground, no taller than your knee, with vines that snake along the soil like they're hugging it for a support. In the Sonoran-style heat that now visits more of our gardens, these beans send roots plunging 6 feet or more, tapping into moisture that shallower crops never touch. I plant them in early spring once the ground feels warm to the touch, about the time the lilacs start to bloom here, nestling seeds just a couple inches down in sandy or gravelly spots that most gardeners would call poor. That's the trick. They prefer life on the lean side. Too much fertility, and they'll throw up a jungle of foliage but forget to set pods. Last year, with only a handful of summer showers, my 10-foot row gave me pounds of nutty, earthy beans that cooked up creamy yet firm, far richer than the pintos I used to rely on. The flowers keep coming even when the air feels like a furnace, and the plants shrug off the kind of dry spells that send green beans into early retirement. In cooler European spots, like a British allotment or a German kitchen garden, I start them indoors in pots and transplant once nights stay above 50 degrees. They fix nitrogen as they grow, leaving the beds sweeter for whatever follows, perhaps a bed of salad greens in the fall. And the flavor? Imagine something between a chestnut and a good pinto, perfect for summer salads tossed with fresh herbs or slow simmered into a hearty stew that tastes even better the next day. What I love most is how they weave into the garden's web of life. Bees hover around the small white blooms, and the low growth shades the soil, keeping weeds at bay without me lifting a finger. If you're new to this, start small. A single packet will surprise you. Just remember to harvest some young for shelling and let the rest dry right on the vine. The pods turn golden and papery, rattling like tiny maracas when they're ready. Stored in a cool jar, they'll keep for years. A pantry staple that feels like a promise against uncertain seasons. Nearby in my rows, cowpeas dance through the same heat with an easy grace all their own. These aren't the finicky snap beans that sulk above 90 degrees. Cowpeas seem to perk up as the mercury rises, setting pods right through the dog days when other legumes drop their flowers in protest. Originating from sun-scorched African soils, they've traveled far and settled happily into my beds. I sow them after the soil warms to about 65 degrees. spacing seeds a few inches apart in rows that get full, unrelenting sun. Their leaves wear a subtle waxy sheen that cuts down on evaporation, and those deep taproots, reaching 4 to 8 feet, mean I can step back and let the sky do most of the watering. In my garden, bush types finish in 60 days or so, perfect for squeezing in a second planting before autumn cools things down. Vining varieties stretch further, scrambling up a simple trellis made from old branches, and they reward me with heavier baskets. The young pods are tender and sweet when picked green, but I often let them swell into shell beans or dry fully for winter soups. The leaves, too, are edible when young, steamed lightly with a pinch of salt. They taste like a milder spinach and add a quiet nutrition boost. Across the Atlantic, in the warmer pockets of Italy or Greece, these peas feel right at home in cottage gardens, mingling with basil and marigolds for natural pest control. Even in Britain's variable summers, a south-facing wall gives them the warmth they crave. They leave the soil richer, pulling their own nitrogen from the air, so I follow them with heavy feeders like squash the next season. One common mistake I see folks make is overwatering or overfeeding. Keep it simple, and they'll repay you with pounds of protein-packed harvest from a patch no bigger than a picnic blanket. Then there are the pigeon peas, those woody shrubs that feel more like a permanent garden resident than an annual crop. In zones where frost stays away, they return year after year, growing taller each season like old friends you can count on. I started with just a few seeds in a corner bed, and now they stand 6 to 12 feet tall, their yellow flowers drawing in butterflies and hummingbirds, while the pods fill with peas that taste slightly nutty and satisfying. Plant them spaced generously, 3 or 4 feet apart, so they have room to branch out, and watch their deep roots work their magic, reaching down 6 to 10 feet to find water even in dry stretches that would stress lesser plants. Here in my plot, they act as living fertilizer, fixing nitrogen and loosening compacted clay over time. In southern France or Spain's Mediterranean gardens, they thrive as perennials with almost no fuss. Further north, treat them as annuals or tuck them against a sunny wall under cloches for extra warmth. Harvest the fresh green peas for curries or let them dry on the plant for storage. They keep indefinitely and cook into a creamy base for stews. The young shoots and leaves are a bonus, sautéed gently or added to smoothies for a mild, earthy lift. Pests tend to pass them by, and the whole plant improves the soil structure, making it a cornerstone for any heat-challenged garden. Shifting from the legumes to the grains that stand tall against the sun feels like moving from quiet companions to bold sentinels. Pearl millet is one I wish more of us knew about. It grows slender and graceful, reaching 6 to 10 feet with seed heads like soft brushes, swaying in the slightest breeze. Evolved in Africa's hottest plains, it pauses during the worst drought, curling its leaves to conserve every drop, then springs back when rain returns, a trick no ordinary corn can match. I scatter seeds an inch deep once the ground hits 65 degrees, and they rocket up, needing far less water than you'd expect for such stature. The grains are tiny and golden, higher in protein and minerals than corn, with a gentle nutty taste that works beautifully as a rice substitute or ground fresh for flatbreads. In my garden, a short row yields multiple pounds, enough to share with neighbors who marvel at how it keeps producing when their corn tassels wither. For European gardeners in hotter summers, like those in Portugal's Alentejo or Italy's south, it feels native. Even in cooler zones, a polytunnel extends the season nicely. Pair it with climbing beans for a living support system, and the whole bed hums with beneficial insects. Sorghum follows a similar rhythm but with its own elegant flair. Taller still, sometimes brushing 15 feet, it carries heavy seed heads in shades of bronze, red, or creamy white that catch the light like jewels. Its waxy leaves roll tight in midday heat, sealing in moisture, and the roots dive deep enough to weather weeks without a drop from the hose. I plant it the same warm soil window as the millet, thinning to give each stalk breathing room, and it rewards me with grain that pops like popcorn for snacks or grinds into a fine, gluten-free flour for baking. The flavor is mild and versatile, perfect for pilafs or porridge on cool evenings after a long harvest day. In the American Midwest or Europe's warmer fringes, it slips seamlessly into polycultures, shading lower plants while building soil health. I've learned not to push it with extra water. Moderation brings the best seed set. One year, when a neighbor's cornfield looked scorched, my sorghum stood proud, a reminder of how these old grains carry forward ancient resilience. Amaranth brings color and drama to the mix. its plumes of tiny seeds cascading like ruby or golden waterfalls. The leaves are edible too, tender when youngs, with a spinach-like taste but far more nutrient-dense. These plants love the heat, powering through 100-degree days with their efficient way of turning sunlight into growth without wasting water. Scatter the fine seeds thinly after the last frost risk. Mix them with a bit of sand for even distribution, and thin to a foot or so apart as they surge upward. In my beds, they self-sow gently the following year, a welcome gift. Harvest leaves all summer for salads or sautés, then let the seed heads mature until they feel dry and papery. Rub them over a bucket, and you'll have cups of complete protein grain with a sweet, nutty edge. Ideal for porridge or popped like tiny fireworks for the kids. It fits beautifully in cottage-style borders across the US and Europe, drawing pollinators while improving soil tilth. Just give it space. The roots go deep and wide. Among the faster grains, Fonio stands out for its speed and grit. This tiny seeded wonder races from seed to harvest in 6 to 8 weeks, perfect for squeezing productivity into short hot spells. It thrives in sandy, poor soils where other cereals sulk, needing barely a sprinkle to get going. Broadcast it lightly, rake it in, and step back. The plants form a soft green carpet that turns golden quickly. The grain has an earthy, couscous-like appeal, rich in amino acids that make it a standout for balanced meals. In hotter US zones or southern European summers, it's effortless. I use it as a quick cover crop between slower plants, harvesting just before it sets seed to keep the bed tidy. The yield from even a small square is impressive, and it stores forever in jars, ready for winter pilafs or fresh breads. Now for the underground treasures and leafy stalwarts that round out the garden's backbone. Bambra ground nuts, those low-spreading legumes from African soils, grow like living carpets, their yellow flowers sending pegs down into the earth to form pods filled with colorful seeds. They love the heat, producing steadily with minimal rain, and their nitrogen-fixing roots leave the bed better than they found it. Plant them a couple inches deep in warm soil, and watch the vines spread 6 to 12 inches tall, forming a natural mulch. Harvest when leaves yellow, pulling up the whole plant to reveal clusters of nuts that taste sweet and nutty fresh or creamy when cooked dry. In my experience, a modest row delivers pounds of complete protein, ideal for snacks or hearty sides. They resist pests beautifully and ask for nothing but sunshine and patience, 4 to 5 months to maturity. Perfect for warmer European gardens too, where they can sprawl along pathways. Cassava brings a tropical steadiness to the heat. Grown from stem cuttings rather than seeds, these woody shrubs develop massive tubers underground, each plant yielding tens of pounds of starchy roots. The leaves are thick and waxy, shedding during drought only to regrow when moisture returns. I plant cuttings at an angle in well-drained spots, spacing them wide, and let them settle in for 8 to 12 months. Peel and boil the roots thoroughly for a mild potato-like base that shines in mashes or stews. The young leaves cook into nutritious greens. In frost-free zones across the southern US or Mediterranean Europe, they become a backyard staple with almost no ongoing care. Even in slightly cooler spots, a large pot or greenhouse extends their reach. They're remarkably pest-resistant, turning poor soil into bounty. Moringa, the so-called miracle tree, grows with astonishing speed, reaching 10 to 15 feet in its first season. Its massive taproot hunts water deep below, and the leaves pack more nutrition than you'd believe. Vitamins, minerals, and complete protein in every handful. I start from seed or cuttings in warm soil, and within months I'm harvesting tender leaves for soups or drying them into powder for smoothies. The young pods, called drumsticks, cook like green beans with a subtle tang. In zones 9 and warmer, it stands as a perennial, producing hundreds of pounds annually with zero extra water once established. Further north, it regrows vigorously from roots each spring. Plant it in full sun, and it becomes a focal point, shading smaller crops while resisting pests like a champion. The flavor is mild and versatile, blending into everyday meals without overpowering. Chiltepin peppers add a fiery spark, those tiny wild cousins of our familiar chilies. Growing as small woody shrubs, they bloom and fruit right through 100-degree days, their deep roots sustaining them through dry spells. Start seeds indoors early, then transplant to a hot, sunny spot. The pea-sized fruits ripen to brilliant red, delivering intense heat and complex flavor that dries beautifully for storage. A single plant yields hundreds over months, perfect for salsas or drying into flakes. They deter insects naturally and fit into perennial borders in warmer climates or pots moved under cover in cooler ones. Their resilience reminds me that even the spiciest challenges have sweet rewards. Finally, Tindora vines bring a vigorous, year-round energy in frost-free areas. These cucumber-like fruits grow on sprawling or trellised vines that climb 10 to 15 feet, producing crisp, tangy bites ideal for curries or pickles. Propagate from cuttings in warm soil, provide support, and watch them fruit weekly once established. They handle humidity and heat where others falter, resisting pests with ease. Across all these plants, one soil secret has multiplied my success more than anything else. A simple addition of biochar. This ancient-inspired charcoal holds water like a sponge, releasing it slowly during dry spells and cutting irrigation needs dramatically, often by half in my tests. Mix it into beds at planting time, about 5 to 10% by volume, and its benefits linger for decades, fostering microbial life and deeper roots. It's the quiet partner that lets these heat warriors shine brightest. Watching these crops come through the toughest days has changed how I garden forever. They don't just feed us, they rebuild the soil, support pollinators, and weave biodiversity back into our plots. In a time when weather patterns shift and water feels precious, they offer hope rooted in thousands of years of quiet wisdom. Whether you tuck a few Tepary beans into a sunny corner or let a moringa tree anchor your backyard oasis, each seed you sow is an act of connection to the earth, to history, and to the simple joy of harvesting from your own hands. So step outside this season, feel the warm soil between your fingers, and try one or two. The garden has room for these resilient friends, and they'll reward your trust with harvests that taste of sunshine and endurance. There's something deeply satisfying about standing in the heat, basket in hand, knowing the soil, and these remarkable plants have your back. Keep tending gently, listen to what grows well for you, and share your successes with a neighbor. That's how we all grow stronger, one garden at a time.